The sharpest steel is formed in the most intense fire. But even steel bends before breaking. Listen up, chosen ones. You were not designed to blend in. You were designed for something larger. You are bigger, stronger, and carry more weight than most people can conceive. But that type of strength, it has a price. The world wants you to be unwavering, impenetrable, and untouchable. They adore you while you stand tall, but they are terrified when you collapse. And that dread is legitimate, because when a chosen one breaks, the consequences are never little. This is more than simply a sad moment. When you crack, it marks the beginning of something no one expects. It's not only agony coming out, it is power, and that force does not wane. It does not disappear. It shifts. It develops. It develops into something unstoppable. Think about it. A lion does not roar without a reason. A storm does not gather simply to pass by. When the strongest of us eventually lets go, the world does listen, even if it claims not to. Your tears, they are not just emotions. They are a warning shot, a signal to those who believed you might be broken, controlled, or silenced. And by the time the signal is transmitted, it is too late for them. According to scientists, sobbing is more than simply an emotional response. It is also a metabolic reset. But what happens if the reset isn't simply personal? What happens when your anguish is so intense that reality feels it? Assume that every time you approached your breaking point, the air became heavier. The walls cracked. The ground trembled under the weight of your spectacular experiences. Maybe, but tell that to those who have witnessed what occurs when a silent power has had enough. Tell it to those who believed they could push you down without consequence. They chuckled as you labored, only to fall to their knees when the storm came. So go ahead. Allow them to think you are weak. Allow them to trust their words. Their betrayals, their games have succeeded, because they will not only regret underestimating you when your sorrow becomes fire and your fight becomes fuel. They won't want to cross you again. This is the moment they should have been worried about. This is the moment when everything changes. And to the one who is still here, the one who understands this message was intended for them, this is your moment. Whether you recently discovered this route or have been treading it alone for years, understand this. Your strength is not accidental. If you've ever been pushed to your limits, if you've ever felt the weight of the world on your shoulders, then hit that like button. Subscribe and leave an 11 in the comments, because true ones know to stay locked in. Because what happens next is not simply a narrative. This is a warning. And now let's take it step by step. Believe me, if you are a truly chosen one, you will not just hear this. You will feel it. Let we begin. Number 1. When a cry shatters reality, they assumed they could push you over the brink and walk away uninjured. They forgot that every storm begins with a single drop. They never saw it coming. They believe they can put on the weight, stack the strain, and push until you have nothing left. They see stillness as capitulation, forbearance as weakness, and restraint as submission. However, when a chosen one reaches their breaking point, it is more than simply a painful experience. It is the catalyst for something they cannot control. And it is their first error, because your breaking point is not the end. This is a warning. It's the split second before the flood surges in and destroys everything. When you weep, you are not only expressing your grief. It's everything you've kept back, everything they should have dreaded from the beginning. They don't grasp what those tears represent. Each bears the weight of every conflict, fought silently. Every treachery is absorbed. Every sacrifice is done without gratitude. Your tears are not simply water. They embody the simmering fury of all times. You remain silent when you should have burnt everything down. They store the energy from restless nights, the scars that never heal, the strain of being the one who must constantly be strong. So, what happens when all of this is unleashed? Reality itself moves. The air becomes thicker and more tight, like the quiet before the storm, like the silence before a wildfire roars to life. People around you can sense it, even if they don't comprehend it. Perhaps there is a sudden tightness in their chest, a peculiar sense of déjà vu, a nagging suspicion that something is going to alter forever. They're not sure why, but they can sense it. The people who underestimated you begin to question themselves. The ones who mocked you find the words stuck in their throats, since a chosen one's anguish is never just that. It's not a power that goes softly into the background. It makes a mark. It leaves an indelible mark on its surroundings. It helps people remember. And this is the reality. They never saw it coming. Your anguish does not just destroy. It transforms. Those who pushed you too far will see their delusions fall. They believe they had control over you. They believe they could break you and go away unscathed. When a chosen one breaks, they carry something with them. Perhaps it is a falsehood that was once believed. Perhaps it is a false sense of security. Perhaps it's the comfort of believing they've got everything under control. But something changes and nothing is ever the same again. They should have been smarter. They should have understood that no fire can burn indefinitely without destroying everything around it. They should have recognized that no storm can rage indefinitely without changing the country below it. However, they didn't. They believed they could control something that was never theirs to control. And now, they are now learning, because this is not just about grief. This is the world yielding to the emotional strength of someone it cannot afford to lose. This was the moment they imagined would never happen. The moment everything they've built on your misery begins to shake. So let them think they've won. Allow them to believe they crushed you, because the instant you let go, the dam cracks, they will see just what a mistake they made. And by then, it will be too late. Number 2, the unbreakable breaks, and the world shakes. They never feared your might. They feared the day you learned it wasn't your armor. That was your weapon. They created a lie around you, a narrative in which you can never fall, never bend, never break. They needed you to be indestructible, not because they appreciated your strength, but because they were afraid of what may happen if you displayed weakness. Because once you accomplish anything, everything changes. The world only appreciates strength when it appears invincible. When a chosen one drops a tear, the illusion breaks. People halt. They are staring. They are questioning what they thought they knew. If someone like you can break, what does it imply for everyone else? If you have a breaking point, how vulnerable must the rest of them be? That dread is warranted, since your tears do not indicate failure. They indicate a shift, a breakdown in the system that formerly kept you in place. You were never powerful only because you endured. You were strong because you carried more than most people could manage. And when the weight becomes too great and the tears fall, it is not a sign of weakness. It's the sound of shackles breaking. It is the point at which all of that pressure stops crushing you and begins smashing everything around you. People idolize the concept of an unstoppable force, but they don't know what to do when that force feels, bleeds, and reminds them that power isn't about being untouchable. It is about surviving each strike and remaining upright. They expected you to remain silent, swallow your anguish, and continue playing the part of the unbreakable. Because if you show them the difficulty, they will have to accept the truth. They were never able to match your strength. Let them feel uneasy. Let them be terrified. Because the instant they see you weep, they will realize something terrible. This is not your loss. This is you evolving. The world is not terrified of a chosen one's might. It is terrified of what will happen if that strength quits holding back. And when that day comes, they will not be staring at a shattered soul. They'll be gazing at something they shouldn't have pushed over the edge. Number 3, Tears are molded into fateful weapons. They mistook your tears for weakness until they learned they were the spark that started everything on fire. Most people cry, then move on. They wipe their eyes, take a big breath, and act as if nothing occurred. But not you, not a chosen one. Your tears don't simply fall. They strike. They do more than simply express their anguish. They rewrite reality. They don't notice it at first. They assume you're simply broken, just disintegrating beneath the weight of everything. But they don't realize that your breaking point is never just the end. It's the beginning. And as the first tear falls, the ripple effect begins. Your anguish does not vanish into quiet. It echoes. It spreads, shifting everything in its path. Perhaps it is subtle at first, a change in energy, tension in the air, and disquiet that even your adversaries cannot understand. But then, the cracks start to appear, because your tears accomplish what words never can. They drive facts to the surface, revealing what has been buried for too long. Lies crumble under their own weight. Masks slide. The illusions that were once so powerful begin to disintegrate. Perhaps it's a person recognizing they weren't as powerful as they imagined. Perhaps it's a system crumbling beneath the weight of a single, unquestionable truth. Perhaps it is the silent murmur of revolt in those who have never dared to speak in front of chosen ones. Tears do not merely cleanse. They carve. They remove weakness, eliminate illusions, and reveal just what is genuine. And who pushed you to this point? The ones who believed that shattering you was a win. They were playing with fire, but they didn't know it until the flames were already engulfing them, since they hadn't anticipated the consequences. They weren't expecting the adjustment. They believed they could control what happened when you reached your limit, but they never realized it was a chosen one. Sadness is never just sadness. It is a force. It only takes one tear. One moment of weakness may awaken what should have remained buried or bring down what was previously unshakable. The people who pushed you felt they were winning, but they had made the worst mistake of their life. The chosen one's tears are not in vain. They do not disappear. They ignite. They unravel. They transform. Nothing and no one can stop that ripple once it starts. What happens next? Number 4, when emotions release devastation, they assumed breaking you would be simple. They forgot that even the slightest break in the soil might cause a calamity that no one can prevent. When a chosen one tears, it is never simply emotions. It's a force, a change, or a rupture in reality itself. Those who stood aside and watched you suffer, those who believed their words, deeds, and betrayals would break you in silence. They never contemplated the storm that would follow. They never thought that your anguish would grow, extend, and swallow everything around it, rather than being buried inside. Your emotions are not just feelings. They exert pressure. They represent mobility. They are powerful. When that pressure builds up for too long, the dam within you is pushed to retain too much. It does not shatter gently. It does not go unnoticed. It erupted. Perhaps it starts tiny, an abrupt change in the air, an unnatural quiet, or a shift in energy that makes even others who don't understand you uncomfortable. Then the world reacts. The sky darkens. The winds shift. The atmosphere becomes thicker, as if it too is bracing for something unavoidable. Nature pays attention when your anguish becomes too much. Thunder rumbles in like a battle cry. Lightning slashes across the sky like jagged wounds. Rain does not simply fall, it drowns. And if there is no storm, the quiet is much worse. No birds, no rustling leaves, and no movement. Only a profound, oppressive calm. As if the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what will happen next. Because this is what happens when something indestructible cracks. It is never simply about one moment of sadness. It is about the weight behind it. Every betrayal, disappointment, and forced sacrifice is contained inside the tears you refuse to weep. But when they ultimately collapse, those who caused them will realize just how much harm they have done. They should have known better. They should have walked cautiously. They should have known that pushing a chosen one too far does not end in quiet. It concludes with reckoning. You do not simply cry. You release, and the consequences are on them. Number 5, the crushing weight of a fate too great to bear. They support you when you succeed, but they abandon you when you fail. They adore the flames, but never inquire how much it costs to blaze so brightly. Being picked isn't a gift. It is a sentence, a life in which the weight on your shoulders is invisible to everyone but you and the world. You are a sign of courage, hope, and something more than yourself. They see anything they choose to see, a force, a legend, a leader, but they don't notice the tiredness behind your eyes. You can have the evenings you want. Just for a time, someone else could bear the weight. They call you powerful, but they never inquire how much that power has cost you. They expect you to be indestructible, but they never realize how many times you've had to rebuild yourself from the ground up for them. You are not a human. You are an expectation, a position to be filled, a duty that must be carried out. They require light, but never refill it. And now for the cruelest part. When you're struggling, no one asks whether you're all right. They inquire, what is wrong with you? When you hesitate, they don't perceive a trace of humanity. They recognize vulnerability. And if you fall, they won't rush to grab you. They take a step back, watching to see whether you would get up again, because that is what they require you to do. That is what they anticipate. So when a chosen one weeps, it's not just grief. It is the sound of a breaking point. Nobody saw this coming. It carries the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, sacrifices, and moments of solitude. Each layer is a rebellion against the chains of expectation, a cry against the falsehood that you must always be strong, steady, and more than human. But here is the reality. They do not want to confess. Even the strongest become fatigued. Even the unstoppable wish they could slow down for a brief period. And yet, they never will, because the world might never see the load. You may never realize the cost, but the chosen one does. And despite everything, despite the tiredness, loneliness, and never-ending weight, they continue to stand. Number 6, coerced or holy. Tears have the power to both save and destroy. They assumed your grief was insignificant, just another passing storm. But not all storms pass. They leave nothing standing. A chosen one's tears are never merely for the world. They may appear to be unusual, even mystical, a sign of purity, strength, and something higher than the ordinary. Some people think they can cure, cleanse, or disclose hidden facts. They perceive them as a gift, a source of optimism. But those who actually comprehend know better, because the chosen one's own tears might be their worst curse. Each drop contains more than simply grief. It contains all they've suppressed, suffered, and lost. And the awful reality, the tears don't just fall. They do something. They agitate the world around them. They move the ground beneath their feet. They make things better when left alone. Most people cry as a kind of release. However, for the chosen one, it is a risk, a gamble. Will it bring brightness or destruction? Will it repair what is broken? Will it tear apart what's barely holding together? The weight of that uncertainty makes each tear feel like a sword suspended by a thread. One false move, one slide, and all they've constructed may crumble. Perhaps they have heard the warnings. Stories were spoken in horror of those who came before them. Those whose anguish was so profound and intense that it shattered the skies. Those whose grief consumed entire cities. whose anger transformed seas into graveyards. Perhaps they've been told that releasing their anguish will unleash something uncontrollable, something old, something that should not have been woken. So they hold it in. They hold their emotions like a weapon. They refuse to fire. They are afraid of what will happen if they do. They grin when they should be screaming. They continue to walk even if they should fall. They pretend as if everything is okay because the cost of breaking is too expensive. But when that control is ultimately lost and the dam breaches, the world will discover the truth. Because the chosen one's anguish does not disappear. It causes anything it comes into contact with to change form. And it is the actual curse. Knowing that the one thing that may offer them relief could also burn everything they care about. Number 7. Expectations have held me back. Defiance sets them free. They erected the chains believing you would never challenge them. But they forgot. Chains are not just intended to bind. They are made to break. Being selected is more than just a route. It is a prison, a cage of expectations built by others who will never be able to carry out what you accomplish. They determine who you must be. Strong, perfect, and always capable of withstanding the worst. They don't perceive you as an individual. They view you as a symbol, and symbols are not permitted to fracture. But here's the reality. They are fearful. The unbreakable only remains unbreakable until it is no more. They put the weight higher, expecting you to carry it all. They demand perseverance, sacrifice, and excellence, because the thought of you falling scares them. If you can break, what does that mean for the rest of them? They pretend you can't. They quiet your anguish before you can even express it. They misinterpret your perseverance as a responsibility. Your silence shows agreement. They tell themselves that because they can bear the weight, they should. But what happens when the weight is too much? Your tears are more than simply sadness. Are in revolt. When you finally let go, it was a secret battle cry against the absurd standards that had been imposed on you. It's not simply emotion. It is defiance. It is every dread, every hesitation, every tired breath that they instructed you to swallow. Finally, coming to the surface, it is a declaration. I'm not invincible, and I never was. And the truth, it rattles them because for the first time, they must confront what they have refused to perceive. They relied on your strength without contemplating the cost. They praised the armor without considering the scars beneath. They wanted a hero, but they never cared about people, because a chosen one's tears are not a sign of weakness. There is a reckoning. The mirage of perfection is being shattered in front of their eyes. It serves as a reminder that even individuals who are regarded as heroes bleed, break, and suffer. In that time, you do not lose power. You take it back. So, let them watch. Allow them to experience the discomfort of knowing they were incorrect. Because your tears provide more than simply a release. They are a statement, a refusal, and a warning. Number 8. Sadness consumes the weak, leaving only fire. They built you up so they could tear you down. However, when the flaws appear, it is their illusions that break first. They never viewed you as an individual. You were a symbol, a pillar of strength, and a concept people could hold on to. They needed you to be invincible because they were scared of their own frailty. As long as you stood tall, they could appear to be strong too. As long as you never faltered, they could overlook their own anxieties. But when you shatter and they see the flaws in your armor, everything changes. Your tears don't simply fall. They expose. They push others around you to look in the mirror and recognize themselves for who they truly are. Those who place you on a pedestal soon discover they never appreciated you. They admired what you represented. When that image collapses and people are forced to view you as human, it upsets them to the core. Because anyone, even you, may fall. What does that reveal about them? It's simple for them to compliment you when you're powerful. It's simple to follow someone who never fails. However, when they watch you break, they do not feel pity. They feel betrayed not because they care about your misery, but because it undermines the tale they have told themselves. It takes away the comfort of believing that someone else will always bear the weight they are too terrified to carry. And this is the true hypocrisy. They loved you even when you were unshakable. They supported you when you were winning. However, when your grief became too genuine and you exhibited the weight of all you held, people flinched. They averted their gaze. They muttered that maybe you weren't as powerful as they thought. But this is what they don't grasp. Your suffering does not indicate weakness. Your tears do not signify surrender. They represent a reckoning. Because when a chosen one breaks, everyone around them is forced to confront the reality. They were never strong enough to stand where you did. They never carried the load you did. They never made the same sacrifices you did. They merely expected you to hold everything without inquiry. But now, they must now be vigilant. Watch as the illusion is shattered. Watch how the burden they imposed on you smashes their own justifications. Watch as they realize they never deserved to stand next to you in the first place. Number 9. When a single tear reveals the world's falsehoods, they raised you up in order to destroy you. However, when the flaws appear, it is their illusions that break first. They never viewed you as an individual. You were a symbol, a pillar of strength, and a concept people could hold on to. They needed you to be invincible because they were scared of their own frailty. As long as you stood tall, they could appear to be strong too. As long as you never faltered, they could overlook their own anxieties. But when you shatter and they see the flaws in your armor, everything changes. Your tears don't simply fall. They expose. They push others around you to look in the mirror and recognize themselves for who they truly are. They place you on a pedestal. Suddenly understand they have never admired you. They admired what you represented. When that image collapses and people are forced to view you as human, it upsets them to the core. Because if you can fall, then what does that say about them? It's simple for them to compliment you when you're powerful. It's simple to follow someone who never fails. However, when they watch you break, they do not feel pity. They feel betrayed not because they care about your misery, but because it undermines the tale they have told themselves. It takes away the comfort of assuming that someone else would always bear the weight they were terrified to carry. And this is the true hypocrisy. They loved you even when you were unshakable. They supported you when you were winning. However, when your grief became too genuine and you exhibited the weight of all you held, people flinched. They averted their gaze. They muttered that maybe you weren't as powerful as they thought. But this is what they don't grasp. Your suffering does not indicate weakness. Your tears do not signify surrender. They represent a reckoning. Because when a chosen one breaks, everyone around them is forced to confront the reality. They were never strong enough to stand where you did. They never carried the load you did. They never made the same sacrifices you did. They merely expected you to hold everything without inquiry. Watch as the illusion is shattered. Watch how the burden they imposed on you smashes their own justifications. Watch as they realize they never deserved to stand next to you in the first place. Number 10. The fall of a god. The rise of the human underneath. They dubbed you untouchable. They assumed you were made of stone. But when they see you bleed, they will not perceive weakness. It will be a battle cry. They built you up, didn't they? We raised you higher and higher, expecting you to stand tall no matter what. They loved you when you were unstoppable, never faltered, and carried the weight of everything without complaint. But the moment you exhibit even a hint of vulnerability, they don't know what to do with you. That is their second error, because a chosen one losing a tear does not make them weaker. This makes them hazardous. People enjoy putting the strongest among us on a pedestal. It's simpler if they persuade themselves that you're something more than human. They don't have to feel bad about putting too much pressure on you. They do not need to inquire whether you are okay. They don't have to question if they pushed you too far since, in their opinion, you don't break. You simply endure. But when that illusion is shattered, people will see you truly feel. Everything changes. Your tears do not degrade you. They serve as a reminder to the world that you are not a remote, untouchable power. You're real. You've bled for this route. You have made more sacrifices than they could ever realize. You've borne a load so heavy that even steel would fracture under it. And yet, you're still standing. This is the bit that scares them. They assumed your strength stemmed from never bending, breaking, or letting others watch you collapse. But now they see the truth. Your strength comes from getting back up and experiencing everything. Despite every hit, betrayal, and loss, I continue to move on. The fact that you can feel so strongly and still keep going, that is not weakness. That is power at a level they can never achieve. And now they must confront the reality that they have been ignoring for far too long. You are not their idealized, unshakable figurehead. You're not. Some cold, uncaring force exists just to fulfill their expectations. You are something far more deadly. You are a human, and there's nothing more strong. There is nothing more unstoppable than someone who has experienced everything and survived everything. Let them watch. Let them realize. Because once they've seen the real you, they'll realize what genuinely drives your strength. They won't look at you the same way again. Number 11, the layer that incites insurrection in every soul. They expected you to remain silent. They had no idea your anguish would cause the ground to shake beneath their feet. There is something disturbing about seeing the unbreakable break. Those who stood tall when others fell. Those who carried responsibilities too severe for people to comprehend. The weight eventually becomes too much. The walls are cracking. The tears fall. And suddenly, those who formerly depended on your strength are more than just witnesses. They are compelled to feel it. Your pain isn't simply yours. It sends ripples outward, breaking down the boundaries people have created around their own emotions. Even those who opposed you, disregarded you, and disliked you. When they watch you fall, something within them changes. They may realize for the first time that power does not imply invulnerability. It entails experiencing every wound, yet still deciding to rise. And the realization? It spreads like a wildfire. Hatred lessens, pride falters, grudges, divisions, and small battles. They all begin to appear insignificant in the face of something genuine. Because your sorrow is a reflection of yourself at that moment. And everyone who looks at it must confront their own reflection. They recognize their own regrets, their own wordless anguish, the humanity they worked so hard to repress. It makes no difference whatever side they previously supported. It makes no difference which lines were made in the sand. The moment a chosen one drops tears, the game changes. Enemies halt, rivals hesitate. Some people will reach out without even knowing why, as if their own spirit is telling them enough. And now, the struggle they were so convinced of seems irrelevant. The person they previously perceived as a threat now appears to be a reflection of their own troubles. But make no mistake, this transition is not a weakness. It's the most deadly type of power. Because when the appropriate person understands your anguish and begins to question the war, the entire power dynamic transforms. Alliances disintegrate, loyalties shift, conflicts that appeared to be irreversible begin to unravel. They believed they had influence over you. They assumed that pushing you over the brink would just quiet you. But they never recognized this. Your sorrow does not only weaken you, it causes the world to wake up. Number 12, pain death and the unstoppable rebirth of the Chosen. They believed they had buried you, but they didn't realize you were a seed, a chosen one. Tears are not just the end of anything. They represent the start of something considerably more deadly. The moment the world believes they have shattered you, that's when they should start running. Because your pain does not simply sit there. It does not decay. It does not vanish into nothing. It burns. It takes away anything delicate. Everything is naive. Everything that is no longer serving you. When you weep, something new emerges from the flames. It's not a weakness. It sounds like the old version of you is being pulled apart piece by piece. Every delusion you ever held dear, every false hope, every moment of uncertainty has vanished in the debris of who you once were. Because at some point, softness becomes a liability, where thinking of tranquility is nothing more than a diversion, where trusting in the benevolence of the world is the quickest way to be destroyed. You develop, and evolution is never kind. This isn't about survival. This is about change. You're not just experiencing agony. You are changing because of it. Your sorrow creates something within you that no one else will ever comprehend. They will notice the shift. They will sense the shift, but they'll never realize how much it cost. Because they weren't present. They weren't the ones carrying the load. They weren't the ones drowning in anticipation, betrayal, and silence. They will only see what emerges, sharper, colder, and inexorable. And when they gaze into your eyes, they will understand it is too late. They did not shatter you. They built you. They made the error of believing that the agony would kill you, that crying would weaken you, and that you would remain down. However, they overlooked the fact that chosen ones do not fall apart. They shed and develop. They transform into something their foes could not have predicted. A force beyond our control. A hurricane without compassion. A fire that destroys everything in its path. So let them believe you have been vanquished. Let them believe you're done. They will quickly realize that the most terrible thing in the world is a chosen one with nothing to lose. And with that, the tale changes. Those who believed they had crushed you will soon learn they have only sharpened you. This is not the end. This is the moment when everything changes. Because when a chosen one emerges from the ashes, they do not return unchanged. They come back stronger, colder, and unstoppable. Those who formerly stood against them will not stand for much longer. If you've ever felt this fire within yourself, if you understand what it takes to persevere and evolve, leave an 11 in the comments. If you've made it this far, then you already know this isn't just another video. This is a reckoning, a warning shot fired directly at those who think they can push you to your breaking point without consequence. But here's what they don't want you to realize. When the chosen ones rise after falling, the world trembles. And you need to be ready for it. If you leave now, if you don't hit that subscribe button, you'll miss the storm before it hits. You'll miss the tools, the truths, and the unfiltered power waiting in the next chapter of this journey. Do not make the same mistake as those who underestimated us. Those who thought they could silence the unstoppable force rising within you. Subscribe now, because by the time you realize what's coming, it will already be too late. The fire doesn't wait for anyone.